Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We're here to talk about employee advocacy, just in case you're in the wrong room. So we're going to talk about employee advocacy and how to leverage your employees to actually become your best recruiters. How do you build that business case? And how do you actually build ROI and measure those results? All really great questions, right? Well, we have three amazing panelists today to talk to you about their stories. We have Aaron Kraljev from Wells Fargo. We have Stacey Elliott from Microsoft. And we have James Hudson from Levi's, who's going to be our moderator today for our fireside chat. No fire, sorry. Rules. So we have a really great program. We're going to cover trends in employee advocacy. Then we're going to have our fireside chat. And then we're going to open it up to all of you. So start thinking about your questions. That's usually a great time to get a better understanding of how you can do one of these on your own. So why employee advocacy? It's very simple. Companies who empower employees to share content drive meaningful talent and business results. One statistic says 58% are more likely to attract talent, 20% are more likely to retain talent, and these companies are 2 times more likely to have revenue growth just by empowering your employees to share content. So as you can imagine, we've seen some pretty incredible growth over the past 4 years. So we're in a very unique position here at LinkedIn. Because we are a social network where employees are sharing content, we can actually share some of these statistics with you. So in just the last 5 years or so, we've seen a 500% growth in employee advocacy, companies who actually have programs. Right now, 20,000 companies are testing an EA program. And as you can see from some of these logos, they vary by geography, types of business, size. So everyone could have a program like this. But not everyone has started yet, or some of your companies are already starting but haven't scaled, and then others are actually leading, like our 3 panelists today. So are you in the build phase? Your company is ready to launch a program, understands the value and KPIs to measure success, but hasn't quite pulled the trigger. Are you in the growth area? You've proven the value, you have a program, but now it's time to scale your program to other lines of business. Or are you leading? You're ready to roll this out to the entire enterprise in your organization. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panel, moderated by the wonderful James Hudson, Stacey Elliott, and Aaron Kraljev.
Our little fireside chat. Hi everyone, I'm James. I head up talent acquisition at Levi Strauss. I'm just coming up for my 4-year anniversary, and I'm already in fact on my second role with the company. I started at our European headquarters in Brussels, and now I'm based out of San Francisco.
I'm Stacey Elliott. I work in the office of the Chief People Officer at Microsoft. I lead our executive communications efforts, both internal and external, social media as well for the HR function, and for Kathleen Hogan, our Chief People Officer. I've been at Microsoft for more than 20 years. I'm not going to say exactly how many, in a variety of different roles: marketing, PR, content development. Oh, and I'm from Dallas, so I live here. And I need to throw out some all y'all. Are all y'all having fun?
It's tough to follow up. My name is Aaron Kraljev. I lead the employer brand at Wells Fargo. I'm based out of Portland, Oregon. I've also been there a lot bit more than 20 years. For us, employer brands inclusive of marketing and advertising, communications, candidate experience, content, and social media. So this is right in our wheelhouse. And happy to be here to talk to you guys today.
Great. So we are here in Texas. So how did you all get started with employee advocacy?
Well, it's probably no surprise to anyone in the room that Microsoft has been on a culture transformation journey, going from what we call a group of know-it-alls to a group of learn-it-alls. So as part of that journey, we started to think about what was important as you moved employees through that culture change. So the sort of steps that we think about are, you start with awareness of the culture. I understand what the culture is. I understand, the elements of the culture. The second phase that employees go through is really adoption. So I'm exhibiting the behaviors. I understand what's expected of me. And that third phase, which is probably one of the most important and maybe the least attended to, is advocacy. So awareness to adoption to advocacy. And when we started looking at that for ourselves, we realized that we were pretty far behind. And our corporate communications team started to benchmark with other companies. And I think this was 3 or 4 years ago. And we had a gap to catch up on that and really look at what were the platforms that we could use, how could we enhance our social media experience, and also move from a company that maybe had a little more process around social media and PR and speaking and what employees could do, and kind of ease up on that a little bit while providing some guidelines around that.
Right.
You mentioned a culture change. So I should say, hold my beer. Well, sorry. So there's natural progressions of cultural change, and those that are maybe a little bit more forced. I think we fall in that second camp. But for Wells Fargo, our journey towards employee engagement or employee advocacy really started 10 years ago. So I came into role in 2009, and one of the challenges that we had, or one of the things we thought we could really stand to capitalize on, was really bridge that gap between what our team members thought working at Wells Fargo was like and what candidates may think or may not know working at Wells Fargo was like, and what we can do from an advocacy standpoint to help kind of close that gap, to answer any unknown questions, to be as transparent as possible. 275,000 team members can tell a very compelling story, and that's not to say we've got that many folks on the platform, but by just starting with our recruiting teams, and now we're rolling out to other folks in regards to whom can post content, who can engage with their networks, it's really made a huge difference in removing some of the misnomers of some things that maybe people thought. They had some assumptions of what it was like to work at Wells Fargo to really what a day in, day out looks like, all while educating their candidates and their peers.
Great. Stacey, I know that you've invested deeply in helping your senior leaders engage on social. Can you share some of your best practices for driving exec buy-in?
Yeah, I started working with Kathleen when she came into her role as Chief People Officer about 5 years ago. And one of the first things that we did was really look at her social platform and what she was going to stand for externally. And we developed a set of pillars for her messaging platform, and then a messaging framework around that. And what we found is that over time, that's really made a big difference in making it easier to figure out, there's this ocean of content out there, what are you going to say? And so if you have this set of pillars, you really look at those and you're like, okay, these are the things that I'm going to talk about. Similarly, Kathleen has peers who, let's say they're involved in business development or engineering. The things that they're going to talk about and that they're going to share are going to be relatively different than what Kathleen's going to share. So I would say, as we began that journey with her, and then her directs, and then their directs, really it grew quite a bit for people to say, okay, this makes it really easy for me to understand these are the 3 things that I talk about. And for Kathleen, it's things like employee experience, inclusion, advocacy for women and girls in tech. It makes it really simple. You've got these guidelines to use. And so that's been really helpful. And the other thing that I would say is to figure out, if you're working with a leader or you're working with a team, are you sharing first-party content, so the things that come out about your company, or in our case, we're sharing more third-party content. So we look for things like Harvard Business Review, Fast Company, Wired, HR publications, and we take articles about things that she cares about, like leadership and talent, and then she'll share those with her interpretation on it, which is really helpful, again, to kind of keep that framework around what is it that you're going to focus on, so that you don't sort of get overwhelmed with all the content that's out there right now that you could be sharing.
It's interesting that you mentioned third-party content. I've certainly found that we drive more engagement with third-party content than usually we do with our own content.
And what's really interesting about that is we found that the articles like their performance review is dead. You know, they are the ones that people engage with the most, or listicle things like 5 ways leaders can, you know, be more humble in their roles. I mean, it's fascinating that the things that people are looking at in general in the news are the same kinds of things that, you know, get engagement when you're sharing that.
For sure. Aaron, how has employee advocacy supported your brand and reputation efforts at Wells Fargo?
Yeah, you know, I think it's had unintended consequences and intended consequences. You know, we want to kind of, you know, high tides raise all ships to create overall a greater awareness for who we are as an organization, like I mentioned before. Unintentionally, we talked about the different kinds of content that you post. I'm one of our curators, so we've just got a handful of curators, no more than 10. My intent is to really kind of raise the overall efficacy or how our recruiting teams or our users of our tool are seen by their peers and their networks. So if breaking news happens and somebody buys somebody or there's a new technology in the marketplace, I will blast a note to my curators to have them get that information out as quickly as possible. This will make you look super smart, you know, get this out there now. And it's had this unintended benefit because their networks are far more engaged and they're getting far more engagement on the content that they're sending out there as well. So really the mixture of those two benefits have really driven that for us.
How about at Microsoft?
Gosh, I would say that, you know, we definitely are thinking about that mix of content. You know, one of the things that I always want to make sure that we're not doing is creating that Microsoft megaphone where you're sharing so much about yourself that it's not, you lose followers. It's not as interesting. So we're definitely trying to create that mix.
Sure. And how do you think about which employees you actually engage with in your advocacy programs? Do you think about that?
We think about it all the time, and it's not to say everybody that you tap on the shoulder to be an advocate is going to knock it out of the park. I mean, I think just like anything else, there's some that really take to it and some that really struggle. So for us, it's not a lifetime appointment. It is really based on performance and how much they're enjoying it. How much I've had some folks come back to me and say, honestly, I can't manage my own networks anymore because I'm getting too much engagement. And so we either advise them to pump the brakes a bit, you know, only broadcast once or twice a week, maybe versus the 5 or 6 they were doing before. But others absolutely take to it and are super engaged. And we've had the other side of the equation where they're posting 20 times a week. And I think helping them find that happy medium, and it's not going to be the same for everybody, but helping them through that process has really been very valuable for us.
Question that I'm sure everyone in the room will want to know the answer to. How do you measure the success of your programs? What factors do you look at?
I'll go. So we definitely are very interested in looking, I mean, we're Microsoft, we love data. So we're interested in looking at the influenced hires, the deals that we've landed, looking at the types of things that customers that we're, you know, that our top tier customers, our lighthouse customers are engaging with. We're interested in what candidates are tapping into, you know, what are the types of content, and we can get all this rich data from Elevate. It's pretty fascinating. So that's, you know, been really helpful. I think for a senior leader, one of the most important things is to be able to share with them that the time that they're spending to share on Elevate, to use social media is valuable. You know, when you think about someone on your senior leadership team, the time, every minute of their day, they're making trade-offs about how they could be spending their time. And I happen to have Kathleen's report this week on the last month of her Elevate shares. And so I was able to show her, you know, what she's been able to generate in terms of influenced hires and also, though, the engagement of our own employee population. We know that when a senior leader shares something, you get 4 times the level of engagement and shares than the average employee. And so for her, that really helps her recognize that the investment she's making is worth the time that she's taking.
I think if you looked at employee advocacy from a media standpoint, I have an advertising and marketing background, so everything comes back to media. Cost per click, cost per hire, cost per action, cost per impression, all those different KPIs, whatever you want to use, our advocacy programs net out every single time. That's not taking into account the engagement of your posts, the education that's taking place, the amount of intelligence that your candidates have. I sit in recruiting now, so you know, the better educated candidate that may be more inclined to apply or look for work at your organization, or maybe they're like, eesh, this is not the place for me. I think both those things are almost equally as valuable. And so if it was just for the KPIs, it'd be well worth our time. Like I said, I advocate just like anybody else. And that activity in my week takes exactly 15 minutes. And there's really nothing else I do in my work week that has as high impact, because that 15 minutes of work between my network and then the folks on my team that reshare it is reaching tens of thousands of candidates. And that's really an effective use of my time, really anybody else on the team that's using the tool.
And I would add to that, for us, we have a special relationship with LinkedIn. And so we actually offer Elevate to every employee at Microsoft. And we have about 200 curators. And, we think about everyone being a recruiter. And that's a really important part of their ability to use that content that's curated for them. Our 200 curators sounds like a lot, but if you think about, we're in 190 countries, so you've got regional curation of content that's very specific, or content specific to a certain engineering group, someone who's focused on AI. So that's been super helpful for them to be able to do that, and we try to make it easy. So Elevate can be integrated with SharePoint. So on our SharePoint, internal SharePoint site, we have a whole, first few tiles that say share on social. And if you think about the number of people, so we have 5 cohorts working, at Microsoft. There might be 6 coming up soon with the Gen Zs. Everyone's in a different stage of comfort with, their social media. And so when you're giving them curated content like that, integrating it through SharePoint and making it very simple for them to just share, it's phenomenal how much engagement you can get.
Great. Now, you both work at large corporations. What advice would you have for people that perhaps work in smaller enterprises to get started on their advocacy journey?
Yeah, so we don't have 200 curators or everybody on the system. Currently today, we have 750 advocates. That number started out as maybe a dozen 8 years ago. I would send out an email with some articles of note or some pieces of news of note that would educate people's respective networks. And then that small group of a dozen folks turned into 20, turned to 50, turned to 100. And sure, we're a pretty good sized organization. But to put something in place in a larger organization may be as tough, if not tougher, than starting something small in a smaller company. That was a very free enterprise for us. The sharing took nothing. My recruiters and my recruiting leaders, hiring managers, that number kept growing and growing and growing. And we're, like I said, about 750 today. I could see in the future, these kinds of things kind of catch fire, so to speak. And no matter the size of your organization, starting small is great because you have to start somewhere, but knowing that it will grow exponentially over time as the program evolves.
Yeah, well, we have 140,000 employees around the world. That's a big company, but I'll tell you a story about a small, microcosm of that. So the Elevate team at Microsoft, it sits in our corporate communications group, came to me about a year ago and said, we'd really like Kathleen on Elevate. We haven't been able to get any of our senior leaders to use it. Would you try it? Now there's 14 of them, I think, right? And so we took a chance and we were sharing content. She was sharing content really frequently. And then all of a sudden, our head of marketing was on Elevate, and then some of our engineering leaders. So it's really just, that's a small group of 14 people, but once someone starts the ball rolling, people really see how easy it is, and they see the engagement, and they see the data, and now we've got almost all of our leaders really using it pretty frequently. So
That's great. Last question before we go to Q&A, so I'm putting you all on notice. Aaron, like me, you work in a very risk-averse environment, which is surprising given that we make jeans in California, but we are risk-averse. So this was really scary for our senior leadership when I suggested this. How did you even get the conversation started at Wells Fargo?
James, you hit it on the head. I think when we first pitched it to compliance, legal, risk, there was a hush in the room. Look, we're going to let people post on the social medias, on the tweeters and stuff like that.
About the bank.
And they're going to say stuff about us. And so it really, there was a level of comfort we had to create. And as the Elevate team said so eloquently today, compliance and legal loves us. And it's true because there are a great deal of guardrails. It's kind of like you guys have kids and you take them bowling and they put up the little rails in the bowling alley, or maybe not.
I know what you're talking about.
It's impossible to throw a gutter ball, and I think in this case, it's really impossible to run afoul of legal and compliance given the way that the tool is configured. And once they see how the tool works, and some of our first test users were compliance and legal and audit and risk, and all those folks are still on the system. They're sharing with their networks because they can see, super easy. You talked about getting executives on board. I think part of the reason why executives are so willing to embrace the tool is because it's easy. I think they don't want to make a fool of themselves in social, and because the tool is so easy and so intuitive and risk-free, it's easier for them to take that leap.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen the same thing. It's curating content that's approved, right? So when a senior leader shares something, you know that if you're in HR and the head of HR shared something, you can certainly share that. And for us at Microsoft, the data that we have is that 72% of the shares on Elevate leave the perspective. So when you share an article and then you write a little perspective, they leave them the same. So but now you're taking something that an executive has said and sharing it with your network. And LinkedIn has really shared the data with us that people's networks aren't the same, so you don't necessarily see this. People don't see the same content, so that perspective can be shared very easily. So it makes it pretty seamless.
Yeah, it's an incredibly powerful tool. So with that, over to you guys, Q&A.
I was just curious how you incentivize those advocates that you got going early on in their stages, meaning did they get a bonus? Was it tied to their performance indicators? Were they, their scorecard? Were they rewarded?
Sure, I'll say the question back so that everyone can hear. The question was, how do you incentivize people to become advocates?
One of the first, it's a good question, and I had gotten the question when I was rolling this out, like, what's in it for me? And I'm like, well, no, it's cool, just you don't do it, and all your peers will. There's your incentive, because they'll have an easier job filling their recs, they'll have more engaged networks. And I didn't mean it to be, so combative, but I think if somebody is looking for some kind of incentive outside of being better at their job or engaging their networks, they probably shouldn't be involved in employee advocacy.
And certainly at Levi's, we were really transparent. We said, we are asking you to do this because it's going to help us fill jobs, for sure. But here are the benefits for you. You'll find that your own network starts to grow. You'll build your own reputation. And once people started to see that happening and see their numbers of connections and followers increase, it started to speak for itself.
Yeah, I think there's some fear too. Just people who may be uncomfortable with social media, they might be worried that they're going to do something wrong. So there's a hesitation. But once people started using it, and just in general as a company, we recognized that social media and advocacy, evangelism was very important for our brand and to help change the perception of our culture. And so I think the company in general had an incentive to use that platform. And we have not only Elevate, but we obviously have our official Microsoft Twitter and Instagram and other channels like that. And then we also make available a hashtag called Microsoft Life. And we tell a lot of stories about people in the company, customer experiences, and we make that available too. So these are, again, first-party stories that folks can use. So we offer a lot of different ways for that evangelism to happen.
And one last thought on that. At Levi's, we actually talk about the Elevate platform during new hire orientation. And we're like, from the very beginning, not only is social allowed, it's encouraged. And here is a tool to help keep you safe. Because to your point, people sometimes are at risk averse.
Mm-hmm.
I was curious now that you have the rear view mirror, what were some of the pitfalls or potholes you wish you'd known as you were standing this up?
We launched our program in 2016, and then our CEO got pulled in front of Congress in late 2016. That's not a pitfall of planning, that's just really crappy timing. And so, but what we found is it really gave us a platform to be more proactive in what we were sharing and how we were sharing it, So nobody would ever want that to happen, but because we had something at the ready, accidentally, as it turns out, it really allowed us to be more proactive in our communications and also share some of the things Wells Fargo does as an employer, our volume, our depth and breadth of geography and those different kinds of things. That said, in terms of standing the program up, we probably started too slow. I don't think I gave us enough credit to be able to stand up quickly enough. We started with 2 dozen and then 100, and then we're at 750 now. We probably could have gone much quicker in getting folks on board. Adoption was much easier than I thought. To your point earlier about incentivizing, I thought there'd have to be some of that. We were going to put out swag bags for people and get people all fired up, and it just wasn't necessary. And so I wish we would have gotten to market quicker and then gone from pilot to full launch faster.
I'm going to echo the same thing. When I think back about the opportunity was there, especially for me, to help Kathleen get on that platform. And, like all of my peers, I was kind of slow to that. And now I look back and I'm like, what was I thinking? Like, this is so easy and it's so helpful. And it's made a big difference for her following, for the amount of content that we're able to share. And I think many ways the company's reputation and her reputation has been enhanced by being part of that and being more active on it.
And I don't want to jinx it, but like touch wood, it was so easy and nothing has gone wrong. And the Elevate team are so helpful in, first of all, helping you pilot it and then giving you credible data to help build your business case, because obviously there's a cost to this, right? But even with a short and small scale pilot, you can build incredibly powerful ROI data that you can then take to whoever you need to take to get the check cut. And they'll help you every step of the way. Over here.
Can you talk a little bit about any training you provided for dealing with comments and haters that are online all the time?
Well, I will say that we just don't see too much of that on LinkedIn. And Kathleen is not really active on other channels, so for me, we don't see it too often, which is great. And I can't really speak to the other platforms, but this one I feel like is such a great place to be active.
I would echo that. 90% of our activity is on LinkedIn, and 10% is across Facebook and Twitter. But if you think about it, employees are sharing to their own networks. So if any of that's happening, it's happening within their own networks. There's like a one step removed from the corporate channel. So it's kind of a non-issue for us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody was going to get haters, right? I'm in touch with it. And so.
You own it, though.
Yeah, I own it. I wear it well. Anyways, so we typically, if you're gonna troll somebody, if you're gonna hate on somebody on LinkedIn, you probably shouldn't be on LinkedIn. And so we've had a little bit of that, maybe a handful of posts. We did a pilot where we cross-post to Twitter for a bit, and in my Twitter followership, I think there's like 13 people, including my mom, is so small compared to my LinkedIn connectivity base. And so we have found that not only does the content play better, but there's less chance of negative reaction on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
Here in the middle.
Hi. When you were building the program, can you talk a little bit about how you created the pathways between the acquisition team and how you kind of fostered the excitement from the community base and then turn that into hiring?
I'll start. So as part of your onboarding to the program, because it's based within the LinkedIn family, that they have this really powerful tool where they can identify. It depends how you're rolling the program out. We started quite small, so we wanted to try and target folks that had more of a propensity to share on social media. So the LinkedIn team were able to provide us with data of who our most active social sharers were, and we targeted them first with a targeted email. Is that what the question you're asking?
Everybody at Microsoft has it available to them, so it's kind of a different situation because we're, acquired LinkedIn, so
They've got
it's a little bit different.
Can we get on that? So we did the same thing. We took data, really good data from LinkedIn, and then we went through and parsed ourselves, and we're like, well, they're going to be a pain. They're going to be a hassle. They can't tie their shoes. And then but then we also augmented that list with people who we thought would be really good, who maybe just needed this extra push to get more active in terms of advocacy. And so it was a blend of the two for us.
The thing I would say is very valuable, though, is to get that report. So we get a report every month on especially for the curators, what you've shared and how the level of engagement. And there's a leaderboard, which I love to look at. That is so much fun to see. Okay, Kathleen shared something today. She was 27. Now she's up to number 6 on the leaderboard of engagement and reach. And so those sorts of things are really powerful tools for people to say, okay, this is making a difference for me. So I would say tap into those for sure.
If you're competitive, it's very satisfying.
It is very satisfying.
And you'd be really surprised about the volume of sharing that your employees are doing. One of our top sharers is an accountant in our Eugene, Oregon office, and sometimes shares like 100 times a day. I'm like, are you doing your job?
So I'm curious if you have considered the application of this to your employee resource groups, and if so, have you seen any measurements or linkages to diversity and inclusion metrics?
Well, I would say, again, everyone at Microsoft does have access to Elevate. We have seen when there are big events around our employee resource groups that a lot of employees who are on Elevate will activate that content. So we had the Pride Parade in Seattle and around the world, and so a lot of employees that were part of that ERG got very involved in that, along with a lot of allies as well. So it's a great opportunity. We had our Blacks at Microsoft 30-year anniversary. That was a big moment for us, and again, lots of people sharing the content that then went global. As well. So it might be a moment in time in one region or one part of the world, but through Elevate, people are seeing that content more frequently and they're able to share it. So I would say it's more organic. It hasn't been as intentional, but we've seen a lot of opportunity there. And I think it's a great suggestion to sort of think about how we can activate those communities.
And same at Levi's, it's organic, but we see spikes during the Heritage Month throughout the year. But we don't proactively do anything. But again, I can take that home and think about that.
I know, it's a good idea.
Yeah, the only part of the organization that has to be on Elevate is our diversity recruiting team, which is about 40 FTE in size. They weren't given much of a choice. And they're also the first people that we brought onto the system. Incidentally, the content they share and their overall activity far exceeds what anybody else is doing, maybe except me, but I own the tool. So what we found is that segment-specific messaging, segment-specific content performs way better than your own content. Microsoft did a thing, Wells Fargo did a thing. So for us, it's vital that anybody in that space. Now we're going to start when we expand, close your ears, Ryan. When we expand to other parts of the bank outside of the talent acquisition organization, we'll probably reach out to diversity marketing teams and other groups that are involved in the different segments that are the elements of diversity across the organization.
Down here at the front. Sorry, making you work.
Thank you guys so much. So I wanted to know about the training that you have for the employee advocates. Can you tell us a little bit both about timing, how long it takes, as well as what the content involves?
At Levi's, it's super quick. It's like a 5-minute section during new hire orientation. And again, to reiterate the point, because the content is curated, it's really safe. The guardrails are already there. And again, we just say, not only is social sharing allowed, it's encouraged, and here's the tool to help you do it.
We have online content, and then if you have a senior leader or a team that wants to hear more about Elevate from our corporate communications team, they'll come in and host an event at any time. They'll go to anyone's all hands and share how to use it. So, they make themselves readily available.
And we were doing this more organically. We had a playbook, which came in really handy. It was probably 5 pages long, single-sided, just talking about the do's and the don'ts. And a lot of that content came from our enterprise social media guidelines, so it wasn't like there was a lot of work in creating new content. Now that we're using the Elevate tool, the team has been amazing in training, not only ongoing training with existing users, but onboarding new users with us as well. So we still kind of use that playbook we have, and we've kind of put in Elevate-specific material, but it's just nice for them to have something to refer back to when they have a question.
And I would say your corporate communication team and your PR folks, you can partner with them and go into different parts of your company and share an overall perspective on social media and then hone in on Elevate and how to use it. So more tactical, but sort of principles of social media for your company. So.
Down here at the front.
Hi there. I was wondering how much content there really is. At Disney, we're really focused on functional areas in recruiting from a COE perspective, and then there are segment-specific recruitment, or there is segment-specific recruitment. So do you have content for HR focus, for tech focus, right? And then kind of enterprise-wide as well. I mean, how much really is there?
A lot. And we really try to tamp down the company-specific rah-rah, because honestly, nobody wants to hear that. I mean, I work there. I don't want to hear it. So between the functional parts or the delivery teams, so tech-specific recruiting or diversity-specific recruiting or early talent-specific recruiting, there's the things they're doing or the things they're looking for, the information they want to share. Then you have the overall things going on in the TA space, kind of this knowledge sharing from one TA professional to a next. And so once you combine those two, there can be 75, 80 pieces of content in any 2-3 week period. When you have 700 folks, 750 folks you're asking to share 2 or 3 pieces of content a week, they have a really good selection. The way I manage this is I go through my feed, because I'm connected to pretty much everybody in our TA org, and if I'm seeing a lot of duplication, it tells me we need more curators or more content. And if we get really good diversity in the kind of content we're sharing, then I know we're getting that balance right.
And we bucket our content into kind of 6 channels. And I've found that we get the most engagement through the kind of Grow Your Career channel, and that's all third-party content from like Forbes, Fast Company, HBR, exactly the same as you guys at Microsoft.
And we have tags, so if you, let's say, Kathleen was going to share an article from HBR and it was on leadership, we'd have a couple of tags. One is leadership, one is culture, and so you're curating your feed. And I'm not sure if that's exactly getting to your question.
Somewhat, although I will say there has been hesitation to push forward a certain hashtag for us. So for instance, I lead HR recruiting, so I'd like to put HR. So to put that out to the leaders, there's been some hesitation.
And the way that we use hashtags with ours, we're looking at what's trending on LinkedIn. So one of the hashtags that we use is hashtag purpose, because we're talking about purpose in our organization, or hashtag growth mindset. So you'll put that on the end of something, or hashtag Microsoft Life, which is a big one. That's obviously where lots of folks are going to understand what is our company about, what is the experience that employees are having every day. I think the recruiters specifically, depending on the type of jobs that they're looking for, also share certain types of content as well. So they might be sharing more HR related content. Much like Kathleen does, a lot of our content is related to HR, or they might be sharing content around AI or quantum computing that's related to something we're doing at our company, to really help people understand those are the things that we offer at Microsoft.
And I would say it doesn't have to be long form content either. Some of our highest engagement is if we put out a photo of the summer interns doing a fun activity. People love sharing that and seeing it. Back.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about ownership of the tool, and if that ever sat in your organizations in the communications department as opposed to sitting in talent acquisition? Because our communications department owns most of our social media content, so they have a feeling that they should own this as well.
Well, ours sits in corporate communications as well. We have a really strong relationship with them. So it's an ongoing partnership, and you guys are a little bit different, right? It sits in talent acquisition.
Yeah, for us it sits in TA. I think I might lie too much about how much work it is, so nobody's aching to take it over. It's not that much work at all. So for us, it sits in talent acquisition on the employer brand side, but I know different companies manage it different ways.
Yeah, I own it as well. But it was really easy for me because corporate affairs wanted a tool like this, but they didn't have any budget, and I did. So it's a really easy partnership now. They got what they wanted, but I still have ownership. So.
And it's a very interesting point, because every couple weeks somebody else will come to us and say, well, hey, we want to leverage the tool. So you've actually got the opposite problem. Not everybody wants to own it, but everybody wants to play.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm just wondering, how do you measure the return on investment, and how do you get to understand the influenced hires that you have from the program?
Well, the great thing is because the Elevate tool sits within the LinkedIn family, there is a ton of data, and it's super compelling. So you can very easily tie down hard ROI, and then there's all the fringe benefits as well that perhaps you can't put a dollar value against. But it's very easy to put a dollar value against the engagement that you're able to drive.
Yeah, I mean, you can literally see, I mentioned before that Kathleen gets a report about the shares that she's made through Elevate and the level of employee engagement, the influence hires, the deals that we've landed, and you can get more granular than that. You can look at the types of content that people engage with, the topics that they look at. I mean, it's a treasure trove, seriously.
Yeah, it's a lot of great data. I think nobody in this room works for a company that's willing to put programs out that are not providing any kind of return on investment or a positive return on investment. So if you just took influenced hires by itself, the tool performs. All the other stuff is and that's really what you're there for, all the engagement and knowledge. That really is that's the main benefit of the tool.
Hi. Just a clarification, because basically what you are saying is that they are sharing a third-party content. So the fact that they are identified as Microsoft or Frogs or Levi Strauss, this is what makes the impact and the influence on the brand, etc., if they are not sharing relevant content of Microsoft or your companies. So basically the identification is what is working for you?
Yes, because it really, when Kathleen shares a piece of content, she applies her perspective to it. So if she's read an article about leadership in Wired and she shares that and says, really great insights here, this is what we're doing at Microsoft, hashtag growth mindset, right? That accrues back to her leadership in sharing that article with her followers, and then you'll see a lot of people engage with that content in terms of comments, likes, shares, and shares through Elevate. So we almost every time we share on LinkedIn and Elevate at the same time, and I can see how it's performing on both. But yes, I think a lot of that is about, you can decide, do you want to share about the company because of the role that you have? And like I said, if it's a team that's working on AI and they're doing fascinating things, like great, share that company about, the information about your own company. In Kathleen's role, I think it's really important for her to look across the landscape of the HR industry and the future of work and talent and really be talking about things at that level, and then interpreting that for folks within Microsoft and outside, how she's thinking about that.
Yeah, what's interesting, I don't want to make it sound as though we don't do any Wells Fargo specific content. I think one of the interesting side effects of having an effective employee advocacy programs is our content generation has ramped up exponentially because now we have a tool to share it. So now we're doing podcasts or video production. It's like 3x of what it was earlier. We onboarded a video on demand tool because now we've got a way to share it. And that was not the case before. If we didn't have a way to share it, there'd be no appetite or need to get these things out there.
I think we can probably do one more question. Yeah.
Wait. Everybody's got to hear it.
You're going to get all your steps today.
So thinking about the channel that you have for Elevate and how it goes there, is there any connection? Does it ever circle back to your employee population? So does that content in any way get shared in an internal SharePoint site for other people who may not be employee advocates, but just to produce engagement? How does that work? How does that
Absolutely. And because of SharePoint integration, so we have an internal website called MSW, and the top half of that usually has these articles. Some of them are, the majority of them are about Microsoft-specific content, and there's a little tab at the bottom that says Share on Social. But if you just wanted to click on it and read the article, you could do that, or you could share it, and that if you clicked on that, you're going to be sharing it through Elevate. So between that and the fact that so many people are connected to each other's networks and they're watching their feeds, they're going to be seeing some of that content as well.
And for us, it's the flip side. On our internal channels, 90% of the content that we're generating is about the company. And on Elevate, I'd say we're 75% third-party content and 25% about the company. Because again, we don't want it to be, rah, Levi's did a thing, aren't we great? It's much more compelling to say, look at this fascinating article from HBR about how you can grow your career.
Yeah, we have the benefit of also managing communications, and so we've got both channels. So what we do is we take the most engaged with content that's externally facing, and when we feature those in our internally or recruiter-facing content as well. You know, things we think that our job seekers need to know, maybe our recruiters should know those as well. And we also encourage our recruiters to share those with the candidates they're interacting with.
And I think Lynn is coming back.
I am. Thank you, everyone. And thanks, everyone, for joining us. I hope you all learned a few things. So if you have just a couple seconds, a few takeaways here. If you haven't started building your employee advocacy strategy, what are you waiting for? You should do it. Every single employee at your company is a recruiter for your company, so don't forget that. And you can measure ROI. So whether it be influenced hires, whether it be job views, page views, applications, you're able to measure all those results. So I want to thank our panelists who got the giggles over here. They're great. And I want to invite you all to stop by the in-lounge. Elevate has a little kiosk, so if you need a demo, we'll have some people on site to do that. And our colleague Melissa is out there with a fun wheel for you to spin and potentially get a prize. So have fun. Thanks, everyone. See you soon.